Hi there, and welcome to the video lecture of chapter 17, Speaking in the Workplace. I don't know why I just had a brain fart, but I just did. So anyways, with that said, let me start sharing the screen so that way we can get going on this chapter. And away we go. Alrighty. So when you are speaking in the workplace, I love this quote from former First Lady, obviously from a long time ago, Eleanor Roosevelt. And that is, we have to face the fact that either all of us are going to die together or we're going to learn to live together. And if we are to live together, then we have to talk. And that can't be more than true when it comes to speaking in the workplace, especially when you are doing group projects and group presentations, whether in your academic career or actually in your professional career. Now, when it comes to group interaction, you're required to do a few things among the group in order to accomplish your end goal, and that entails what is the size of your group. It can be anywhere from more than two, or more than one, I should say. That becomes a group if you have more than two, to five, or whatever. The amount of time that you have to present your information, who's going to be the leader actually, whether it is a designated leader, an emergent leader, or even an implied leader. Because think of it this way, if you are a designated leader, obviously that is someone that has been elected by the entire group. If you're the emergent leader, then that has something to do with basically being self-appointed. And if you're an implied leader, basically it's about the highest rank or expertise in the group. Now, your leadership roles are as follows. If you are in a group setting and do a group presentation, if it's the implied leader, members in the group will defer someone to that role. Again, an emergent leader is someone that is self-explanatory. I'm sure there are several of you out there that actually are emergent leaders, that it's just obviously it comes into play. You're just that natural born leader. So you would obviously take the helm of the group and you should be good to go with that one. But there are also other types of leaders between. So that being said, there's also characteristics of small groups. Your shared goals are supposed to be cohesiveness, unifying elements. You have a common purpose. Those are your shared goals. Mutual feelings. You have a task groups. They are formed for implement. I can't even say this, for implementation of solutions. I can't believe I can't say that word for whatever the reason. And then you have what are called encounter groups. Those are some of the characteristics of small groups, where you contribute to interpersonal learnings and to insight. Those types of groups are Parents Without Partners or even AA. So those are those types of groups. Social groups establish friendships and also personal relationships. When you speak in a workplace setting, you develop, when it comes to small groups, types of groups have life cycles that they begin to work and attempt to solve problems and then conclude with them. You start to form getting to know each other and getting to the task at hand. And storming obviously is the interpersonal conflict. Whoops, as you can see, there's no T, but you do understand that there is some sort of interpersonal conflict. And that's when you have to think about putting your personalities aside for the common goal of trying to get the task done. So developments of small groups, they're norming, they're working through the many conflicts and become more cohesive. You know, you have to remember that when you work in a small group, you have different personalities. So you have to work through those. And sometimes your values may not be the same as another person, but when you're when you're forced into a small group, then you have to put those types of feelings aside, or at least come together to agree to disagree, so that way, once again, you have an end goal. Development of small groups also is performing insight and action. Members complete tasks and adopt constructive behavior to implement them. You may end up not necessarily having the same exact views, but you may end up implementing one person's view over another in order, once again, to get the task done. You have to look at it as it's not about you. Again, There is no I in team. So when you're doing solving problems in groups, it's questions for discussion. They're typically open-ended. They're not a yes and no. Yes and no is tend to be more dismissive. And what you tend to do is promote better discussions than the regular yes or no alternatives. You have to go with questions for fact. You also have to go with questions of value and questions of policy. Where does that come in? Again, that has to do with persuasive speaking. When you do propositions of fact, value, or policy, they are also those types of questions in a group setting workplace. So questions of value require members to use personal judgment or feelings to evaluate issues by using words such as effective, fair, harmful, beneficial, to basically phrase out and phase out value questions. And then questions of policy, think about it, stimulates discussion about solutions and future actions using such words as should. Not any different than when it comes to your persuasive speaking. When you're developing a solving agenda, you define the problem, you narrow it down, you analyze it, you set up the criteria, you suggest the solutions, you apply the criteria to the solution, you monitor the success of the solution. It's similar to a motivated sequence. It's those 8 steps that are very similar to Maslow motivated sequence. It's basically very, very similar. When you're participating in groups, be an active observer, not a passive one. Support your group procedure as best as you can, because you have your name behind that as well in terms of the project and the presentation. You should always be as reliable as you can. Be willing to compromise even, and hopefully that they can also listen to what you have to say. Be courteous and respectful, and encourage and energize members to do the same. Self-centered behavior does not necessarily work when it comes to speaking in the workplace. Members that use groups to achieve their personal goals, and not so certain if you've already experienced this in your academic career, or if you've already had a professional career, I should say, where members that use their groups to achieve their personal goals and demonstrate lack of interest in the group and the needs and the objective at hand. You have to sort of sift out those types of behaviors and examples. Remember, you've heard maybe even your mother say my way or the highway. So you don't want that happening in a group setting, especially when you are trying to get the task done in the workplace. Leadership in small groups, if you are the designated person, remember they could be anywhere from focus groups to symposiums, panels, forums, buzz groups, role playing. You can go to a TED Talk. Those are basically small discussions as well. It could be anywhere from like 50 to 100. So, it's a panel. It's a panel and it's a forum. And you may have already been in these types of special discussion forums, or formats, I should say. At the end of the day, you have to remember that your role in participating in the groups are several things. You have to commit to the goal with the rest of the group. You have to fulfill your individual assignments. Avoid as much as you possibly can interpersonal conflict. What you do need to do is, if you find that there is interpersonal conflict, to address it as best as you can and constructively, and focus and keep the discussion on track. Let's see if I can get this going for you.
Several years ago here at TED, Peter Skillman introduced a design challenge called the Marshmallow Challenge. And the idea is pretty simple. Teams of 4 have to build the tallest freestanding structure out of 20 sticks of spaghetti, 1 yard of tape, 1 yard of string, and a marshmallow. The marshmallow has to be on top. And though it seems really simple, it's actually pretty hard because it forces people to collaborate very quickly. And so I thought this was an interesting idea, and I incorporated it into a design workshop, and it was a huge success. And since then, I've conducted about 70 design workshops across the world with students and designers and architects, even the CTOs of the Fortune 50. And there's something about this exercise that reveals very deep lessons about the nature of collaboration, and I'd like to share some of them with you. So Normally, most people begin by orienting themselves to the task. They talk about it, they figure out what it's going to look like, they jockey for power, then they spend some time planning, organizing, they sketch in, they lay out spaghetti. They spend the majority of their time assembling the sticks into ever-growing structures, and then finally, just as they're running out of time, someone takes out the marshmallow, and then they gingerly put it on top, and they stand back and ta-da! They admire their work. But what really happens most of the time is that the ta-da turns into an uh-oh, because the weight of the marshmallow causes the entire structure to buckle and to collapse. So there are a number of people who have a lot more uh-oh moments than others. And among the worst are recent graduates of business school. It's amazing. They lie, they cheat, they get distracted, and they produce really lame structures. And of course, there's teams that have a lot more ta-da structures. And among the best are recent graduates of kindergarten. And it's pretty amazing, as Peter tells us. Not only do they produce the tallest structures, but they're the most interesting structures of them all. So the question you want to ask is, how come? Why? What is it about them? And Peter likes to say that none of the kids spend any time trying to be CEO of Spaghetti Inc., right? They don't spend time jockeying for power. But there's another reason as well. And the reason is that business students are trained to find the single right plan. Right? And then they execute on it. And then what happens is when they put the marshmallow on top, they run out of time. And what happens? It's a crisis. Sound familiar, right? Okay, what kindergartners do differently is that they start with the marshmallow and they build prototypes, successive prototypes, always keeping the marshmallow on top. So they have multiple times to fix, and they build prototypes along the way. So designers recognize this type of collaboration as the essence of the iterative process. And with each version, kids get instant feedback about what works and what doesn't work. So the capacity to play and prototype is really essential. But let's look at how different teams perform. So the average for most people is around 20 inches. Business school students, about half of that. Lawyers, a little better, but not much better than that. Kindergartens, better than most adults. Who does the very best? Architects and engineers, thankfully. And 39 inches is the tallest structure I've seen. And why is it? Because they understand triangles and self-reinforcing geometrical patterns are the key to building self-reinforced stable structures. So CEOs, a little bit better than average, but here's where it gets interesting. If you put an executive admin on the team, they get significantly better. It's incredible. You look around, you go, oh, that team's going to win. You can just tell beforehand. And why is that? Because they have special skills of facilitation. They manage the process. They understand the process. And any team who manages and pays a close attention to work will significantly improve the team's performance. Specialized skills and facilitation skills, the combination leads to strong success. If you have 10 teams that typically perform, you'll get maybe 6 or so that have standing structures. And I tried something interesting. I thought, let's up the ante once. So I offered a $10,000 prize of software to the winning team. So what do you think happened to these design students? What was the result? Here's what happened. Not one team had a standing structure. Not one had, if anyone had built, say, a 1-inch structure, they'd have taken home the prize. So isn't it interesting that high stakes have a strong impact? We did the exercise again with the same students. What do you think happened then? So now they understand the value of prototyping. So the same team went from being the very worst to being among the very best. They produced the tallest structures in the least amount of time. So there's deep lessons for us about the nature of incentives and success. So you might ask, why would anyone actually spend time running a marshmallow challenge? And the reason is I help create digital tools and processes to help teams build cars and video games and visual effects. And what the Marshmallow Challenge does is it helps them identify the hidden assumptions. Because frankly, every project has its own marshmallow, doesn't it? The challenge provides a shared experience, a common language, a common stance to build the right prototype. And so this is the value of the experience of this so simple exercise. And those of you who are interested may want to go to marshmallowchallenge.com. It's a blog that you can look at how to build the marshmallows. There are step-by-step instructions on this. There are crazy examples from around the world of how people tweak and adjust the system. There's world records that are on this as well. And the fundamental lesson, I believe, is that design truly is a contact sport. It demands that we bring all of our senses to the task and that we apply the very best of our thinking, our feeling, and our doing to the challenge that we have at hand. And sometimes a little prototype of this experience is all that it takes to turn us from an uh-oh moment to a ta-da moment, and that can make a big difference. Thank you very much.
And so I brought that up really quickly towards the end of this discussion because of what reason? Uh, Admins typically delegate a lot of things to do in the office, or and they have a lot of people right under them, executive admins. So they're used to delegating, which is why that particular percentage is higher. When you think about it, they actually are the emergent ones. The business people want to be leaders, but they're just thinking about it so much that they don't think about the team. Whereas if you saw the kindergartners, they don't care about teams. It's not like, hey, how are you? Whatever the case is, I just want to build this and then go from there. And of course, if an architect couldn't do it, then we wouldn't be standing. Let's just put it that way. So when you think about that marshmallow challenge, think about that in a group setting. If you decide, or I shouldn't say if you decide, if you do come into encounter, if you have to become part of a group project and a presentation, what role are you going to play? And is there going to be any conflict in the situation? So you can look back on this chapter or on this video lecture and see what's going on with the dynamics and then use those tools and move forward. You may not be doing a group project or a group presentation anytime soon, but at least you have the tools to understand where is your role and what can you do and what to, not necessarily what not to do, but to understand the process, and that it's more than you. Once again, it's team, and there's no I in team. So we're done with this chapter. Thank you so much, and we will continue at a later date.